Even at our tech events, nobody discusses failures. It's just those that have raised capital. These are the people we listen to. These are the people we give the media attention.
Meet Segun Cole, a serial entrepreneur and expert in LP investor relations. He is the founder and CEO of MAASAI, Africa's leading and a marketplace for startups.
It's a vicious cycle, isn't it? Historically speaking, why has there been a reluctancy to invest in VCs that are investing in Africa? Segun, what is your answer to people asking you, what do you do?
So, one line, I drive impact where it really matters, right? In the African tech ecosystem. That has also always been at the core of what I do, who I represent, and just the kind of legacy that I want to leave behind. All about driving impact in the lives of founders, business owners, basically.
What does impact mean to you? Because I hear this term used very broadly, and I myself feel that our mission at the African CEO is to drive impact across the continent, but it's very broad. What does that mean for you?
So for me, impact is that launch pad, right? That you as a person can leverage to go from point A to point B, right? And that just speaks to the heart of ecosystem enablement, ecosystem building, right? The people, the stakeholders, the tools, the platforms that people are able to leverage, right? To take them from who they are to who they want to be, right? So for me, if you look at the story of Africa, take the story of Paystack, take the story of Flutterwave, take the story of Paga. I'm talking about Nigerian startups now. And even when you even spread it broad across the African continent, uh, 10 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, nobody knew about this people, right? But today, leveraging technology, with the right connections, with the right networks, they're able to build billion-dollar companies that now even the term unicorn is used very broadly, and people are like, oh wow, this is possible. Ideas that made that happen, people that supported those ideas and helped them bring them to life, and put them on the global stage where the likes of Mark Zuckerberg can come into the Lagos ecosystem. And from then on, we begin to talk about Lagos Valley, Yaba Valley, right? The Silicon Valley of Africa. So for me, impact is those roles, those people, those hidden faces, right, that are propelling and making the ecosystem work, whether they are known, whether they're not known. I mean, that's impact. And that's where I've invested my life's worth in playing a very effective role in just making sure that that wheel continues to spin.
I like what you said about getting from point A to point B. You are at point A and you want to get to point B. And the fact that now there is opportunities and actually there's hope for individuals across the continent to get to point B. You also have quite an interesting journey. Could you walk us through how you essentially got from that point A to now point B?
So it's amazing, right? And it goes far back as um, me working as an executive assistant, right? Uh, in a human resource, or say people sourcing consulting firm, right? Being an executive assistant to this great guy that uh, make sure that I'm in every strategic meeting, right? And this person allows his executive assistant to sit with all the trainees, right? But these are people heading multinationals, right? And while this training is going on, and he's asking, you know, summary feedback on what he's teaching them, he's also asking me as well, right? And while that is going on, this set of folks are looking like, who the hell is this guy? Like, how is this guy involved in all of this? Like, we paid good good sum of money, right, to be involved in this. How, who is this guy that he's always at the end of the you know? But that opened me up to a lot of things, right? Aside from learning, that built my confidence, just made me believe that I that sense of belonging, right? And I would say it also developed my curiosity. At the same time, this great, amazing person that happened to be my boss uh, also gave me books, right? Hey, go look, read this, giving me books. And I'm just like reading and opening me up to the world of entrepreneurship. So I went to meet him and I'm like, hey, I know I'm working for you, but I haven't been able to sleep because the more I watch the news and read about this, I'm just feeling something in me that I can solve for this. And he's like, look, go for it. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, go for it. Find solutions to that. And that's exactly how I launched into the world of entrepreneurship, building my first startup. So just this kinds of roles that he played, and so many other people, very instrumental to my to the birth of my my venture into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, what I'm also hearing from that story is, yes, of course, one, you were provided opportunities from these individuals that saw something in you. That's the first thing. But the second thing is that you essentially upskilled yourself.
And I really stress uh, the position of mentors, right, in the lives of entrepreneurs, in the lives of founders, right? Because mentors are people that have been there. They have navigated all kinds of um, challenges around entrepreneurship that you can imagine. So mentors are able to scale you. They're able to help you navigate. They're able to provide that guidance that you need. They would save you time. They'll save you resources. They'll save you that effort and just help you to go from 0 to 100. And one just has to be humble enough, right? Devoting time and energy to seek those people out, right? And engage them, right? And trust me, this has been what, if I look back at the successes I've been able to achieve today, right? Even in my personal life, uh, it is also heavily on the back of mentors that paid it forward and just like, look, Cole, this is what you should do. This is how you should build this. Okay, I did this and I failed, so do not do this or do this way. And it just works. And you're like, oh my God, if I continue doing like this, definitely this would have failed. But without mentors, man, you're just going in blind and you're
Yeah,
going to you're going to stay confused for a long time.
definitely. I think that that's such a good point, because you can either learn from your own mistakes, so you can do and learn from those mistakes, which of course is going to, set you back in terms of time and perhaps resources, or you can learn from other people's mistakes, which of course is going to save you that time. And I
A lot
think
of
that's
time.
such a good way to look at it. I want to go into the fundraising landscape throughout the continent. Currently you interact with a lot of founders and investors. In your opinion, what does the current landscape look like for investment across the continent into the specifically early stage startups?
So again, I love to take a 10-year perspective, because what you see in times like this is a lot of articles of doom and despair, right? The rising interest rates in the US, the rising inflation globally, the absence of dry powder, right, for startups, down rounds taking place here and there, and all of that. A lot of de-risking, a lot of valuations adjustments, right? A lot of venture capital now having to act like private equity individuals, right, in assessing deals, due diligence taking much longer, angel investors now being more sophisticated like venture capital investors. So there's just a lot of information out there that is overwhelming, right? And how each early stage founder begins to process this kinds of information could really lead to a point of hopelessness and despair, because what they all now scream back at you is that there is no money, how it started and where we are today. And with that perspective in mind, you see that the African tech ecosystem has actually been growing from a 10-year perspective, right? Now, that doesn't mean that we fail to recognize everything that has happened from 2022, everything that has happened pre-COVID-19, and how we're still playing catch up post-COVID-19. But the reality remains that from 2021, there was a lot of bubble, right? So much dry capital, right? With less due diligence, which was backed by the fear of missing out, FOMO, right? So we saw a lot of investors outsourcing their due diligence to others. So what you typically see is that, oh, because XYZ fund is investing in this company, definitely they would have done their due diligence. So let's just write a ticket, let's just cut a check and get in, just to get in certain startups, just to be on the cap table. In fact, I coined it a term called celebrity VCs, right? So you also saw a lot of funds just investing because a celebrity VC is investing in a startup. So valuations going haywire. You see, in fact, this was the time when you can hardly tell, you can hardly define a round, because you see a pre-seed startup raising a seed ticket, right? And you're wondering, like, how is this a pre-seed round, right? How is $3 million a pre-seed round?
Yeah.
Right? Backed by maybe $30,000 in MRR, right? And you're like, how does it help me make sense of this? But look, the celebrity VC is on that cap table, right? And the announcement's about to go up. Do you want to be part of that or not? So you also saw these angel investors. Oh, the celebrity VC is there. So they also put their money. So economists and people that understood and identified early that this is a bubble knew that at some point in time, a correction was going to happen. And the question was when, right? So fast forward, these corrections are now taking place, where investors and founders now realize that, oh, we were overvalued. or we invested without strong business fundamentals, or what we were doing was power law. So now we understood that just 2 out of 20 of our portfolio companies were going to bring in the kind of ROI that we anticipated. So we can't provide follow-on capital for this 18 portfolio startups. But where do they go to? While this is happening, you're now also having the rising inflation and the rising interest rates that have now affected a lot of LPs and US-based investors, global investors, right? At the same time this is happening as well, a lot of funds are also approaching maturity. And a lot of funds are also fundraising, right? And now you're trying to fundraise for Fund 2, for Fund 3, and your LPs are asking you, where's the return on investment on Fund 1?
Typically, how long is a fund maturity period?
So it goes from 10 years to whatever it is for every unique case, right? But most of the African VCs that we see, typically 10 years. So a lot of them have approached this maturity period, and now they are running around to exit these deals, which led to why we created MAASAI, right? Because MAASAI is an M&A marketplace for Africa. So we're helping these investors exit their deals, right? Because if you fail to exit your deal, then you don't make money for your investors, for your LPs. So why would you go back to them that you want to raise when you didn't return on that portfolio? So now a lot of VCs are running right everywhere to exit deals. At the same time, they're trying to fundraise for Fund 2. And that's why it's so difficult for even the VCs. So the startups are fundraising, the VCs are fundraising.
Yeah, I think that this is something that not many people understand or know, is that
Yes.
VCs themselves don't have their own money, or not many of them invest their own money. It's actually, fund managers. So it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? Because it
It
starts
is.
at the top of
It is.
essentially the bottom being the startup founder, and above them being the VC, and above them being the limited partner, and family offices or influential individuals investing in these VCs. Historically speaking, why has there been a reluctancy to invest in VCs that are investing in Africa?
That's a very, very good question. Very good question. Africa is a unique continent, right? And it's unfortunate that even for global investors, a lot of global investors think Africa is a country, right? And that's also contributed to the issue, right? Because you see some global investors investing in Africa, or some family offices investing in Africa without any office in Africa, right? They're just investing from outside Africa. And this has also contributed to the problem that we have today. So they know nothing about Africa. It's just kind of copy and paste Silicon Valley playbook, and then they get burnt. And then they say they're not going to invest in Africa again, right? And then they spread the word, right? So just recently now, we're beginning to see foreign investors, global investors, leveraging the local investment community to invest in Africa, right? Because they realize now that in order to invest in somewhere, you have to understand the investment landscape. You have to understand the ecosystem. Then and then can you make a well-informed decision when investing in that continent or in that country. There has been that lack of information. There's been that lack of awareness of the opportunities in the African tech ecosystem, right? And in fact, there's also been more information of the challenges than the opportunities, right? So it's very easy to say, oh, um, political instability or literacy or whatever. It's very easy to just quote whatever you see on Google. But it's another thing to have a first-hand experience. Africa is a continent of 54 beautiful and amazing countries with unique a landscape, unique opportunities, unique mobile penetration scenarios, digital connectivity, regulatory landscapes, and the opportunities are endless, right? The market sizing, the population, the human capital, the very low hanging fruits across sectors, right? And how Africa is like the next frontier for growth globally. So I think that as that continues to happen, then we'll be seeing more of funds and capital flowing into Africa to chase that growth and return investments to investors.
Yeah, definitely. I think that another point is, I mean, personally, I'd like to see more success stories over the past couple months and years. You know, we have had a few unicorns, but I think it's also the ones that have not particularly been unicorns, but have still, you know, returned 5, 6x, 7x to their investors. I think those founders, those businesses should also be, those stories should be shared to create that awareness. Speaking of, you know, the founder side of things, what do founders need to be doing differently here? And I guess the first point, the first, I guess, starting point would be there's not enough risk capital. So that really early stage founder, of course, has to bootstrap or find alternative ways to fund their venture, to fund their startup, especially if they're looking to scale. You know, it's really, you really have to be resourceful. You really have to be resilient in this market. What else am I missing out on for that early stage founder in terms of, you know, traits that make one successful?
Thank you for that. Unfortunately, today you have a lot of founders building to fundraise. And it's quite unfortunate, but it's the truth. So founders are just building with the hope that, hey, look, I can raise capital. And so I tell a lot of founders that I mentor that, look, it all starts with the why, right? And if the motivation behind why you're building a startup isn't right, eventually that startup will fail with capital or not or without capital, right? And so how many startups are building to basically survive on their revenues? And this leads me to the question I asked while I was giving a masterclass for founders just yesterday. What would you do? And I asked each founder, what would you do if you fail to fundraise today? What's your plan B? And I tell you that the whole room was silent. What's your plan B should your fundraising not scale through. And we realized that many founders are just building to fundraise.
Do you think that's because of, this hype about the startup world and all the, I guess, glamorous stories that we're hearing from Silicon Valley? Do you think that's why there's this mentality of build something to fundraise and then we'll see?
Yes. So I gave it a name. I called it high-tech journalism, where we are just glorifying fundraising announcements. So look, I don't mind being a very controversial person in the African tech ecosystem, but I call it for what it is, right? So there's a huge difference between a founder that hasn't fundraised and a founder that has fundraised, right? And that alone is a stigma in itself. So it's basically like you have no voice if you haven't raised capital. Even at our tech events, nobody discusses failures. It's just those that have raised capital. These are the people we listen to. These are the people we give the media attention. So then what that happens is that you now create a mindset that I have to raise capital to have a voice. Right? So you even see founders dedicate 90% of their time fundraising than building their companies. This also explains why you have founders traveling around the world, speaking from here to there, and not focusing on their businesses. Why? Because there's also the optics angle. Again, I would say that's not just entirely left to founders. That's also a product of VCs pressuring founders. So it's not every business that has to blitz scale. If you understand that VCs want you to blitz scale, then that's exactly what you have to do. But if you understand that you don't want to be under that kind of pressure, you want to grow at your own rate, then venture capital is not for you. Then you now need to begin to look at alternative sources of revenue, whether that is royalty-based financing, whether that is revenue-based financing, whether that is looking for grants. So get traction at all costs, because there are great success stories of startups around the world that are revenue-based, right? And look, again, if you look at even what is going on in the ecosystem, right? It's so sad. You hear things like misappropriation of funds, right? You hear things like, how do you raise capital and the next thing you're going on a spending spree, right? Like, first of all, you have to understand that investors' money is not your money. The money was given to you to build your business. So there's just a lot of mindset problems, right? For a lot of founders. A lot of founders like, look, we're going to raise money. We're going to get a very big office. We're going to buy things that we don't need. We're going to throw parties, right? All of this is to what? To grow traction. It doesn't make any sense. So first of all, you have to know if venture capital is for you. But you also have to build like you are not going to have to rely on venture capital.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good point about seeking alternative sources of funding. There's not just one type of capital. And once more, another good point that you made was you have to figure out if VC is really for you. And it's, if you're not looking for that, blitz scale, as you describe it, I like that word, blitz scale, then you should consider alternative ways to fund your business if you are looking to fund it. I want to go into MAASAI and the mission that you're on. Could you maybe describe the mission and what you actually trying to accomplish with MAASAI and the community?
Yeah, thank you so much. So again, with MAASAI, right? Look at how many prolific startups that have gone to the graveyard in Africa just in 2023 alone. From startups that have raised $83 million, $60 million, $55 million, cumulatively over $500 million. The A-list of the A-list investors on the cap table, VCs on the cap table, just in 2023 alone, I think that number was close to 27. Not to talk of the ones that did not make the news. And in 2024, Q1, we're already having some decent numbers of startups that are shutting down. And when you ask why, it's also a mix of reasons. Mismanagement, corporate governance, errors, fraud, economic issues, co-founder misalignment, and the list goes on and on. But what remains is that this company is shut down, and that's bad for the ecosystem. That's bad for investments, because if investors do not see a clear path to exit, then less venture capital comes into the ecosystem. And this is why we founded MAASAI. MAASAI is an M&A marketplace for Africa, where we help acquisition-ready startups, businesses find a new home. But we realized that that was just one part of the problem. Another part is how many startups actually know what it takes to be acquisition ready. Many founders do not even know the difference between shutting down a startup and shutting down an LLC. Many companies do not even know what it means to shut down an LLC in Delaware as compared to Cape Town or Nairobi. Many founders do not even know how much you need to have in your bank account for you to be able to shut down your company properly or get acquired. Many founders do not even know the runway that you need to have that can still afford you to shut down without being exposed to litigations. So there's a lot of information asymmetry and ignorance in the ecosystem, and that's where MAASAI is in. First of all, to help founders, to help startups get acquisition ready, and to connect them with potential buyers and help their startups find a new home. This is our mission, and we believe it's a very critical mission for Africa's tech ecosystem, not just right now, but continuously.
So I'm a startup founder, and let's say 3-4 years down the line, I'm looking to merge with a bigger company, a bigger corporate, maybe it's a bigger media company. The first question has to be, what should I be looking at hitting in terms of revenue? And the second question is, in terms of closing down, what should I be aware of? I think that's the first two questions. And then the third question is, how do you guys monetize?
So the first question is very simple. In terms of revenue, this differs across sectors, across the last stages of the funding round, the last funding round that this startup has had, because for each potential buyer or acquirer, they have what they're looking for. So they have that benchmark that they're going to stack your transaction against. Even for mergers, any startup that's about to be merged with another will tell you that the list is the DD is sophisticated, right? But for revenue, to each his own. This also speaks to fundraising, because I tell you that a lot of founders hear things like, oh, you have traction, but your traction is too early. So you have founders begin to ask one question: what traction is enough traction for example, a pre-seed round? What traction is enough traction for a seed stage round? But every VC has a unique traction that they want to see. They have a unique MRR, ARR that they want to see. It's not unified, right? So even for acquisitions, there is no unified, oh, this is what you have to have. It's what the potential buyer wants to see. So solvency is very key in terms of what I can say. Solvency is very key in terms of shutting down, right? And shutting down properly, right? One very, very key thing in shutting down your company, most importantly when you have investors, is stakeholder management. You have stakeholders, you have investors, you have merchants. Take, for example, a fintech. Have you used customers' funds? Because you have to return them. Unfortunately, a lot of fintech companies are using customers' funds, right? So how do you return them back? Do you have suppliers? Do you have merchants that you're owing? How do you settle them? So stakeholder management is very, very key, right? Again, even before considering shutting down, what we do, a service that we offer startups, again, is that we look around, turnaround potentialities, right? Is there, and so we have turnaround experts that we work with. Is there a potential to turn around the company? Mind you, you have VCs and investors, private equity, that buy businesses, turn them around, spin out, and make profit. So are there potentials to turn around the company? You look at that before you even begin to consider shutting down. And then if there's a very low turnaround potential, then, okay, stakeholder management. A huge part of MAASAI is asset sales. So are there things that you can sell and still return some money to your investors? Do you have 300 POS terminals? Why would you shut down and still have these kind of things with you? Do you have 1,000 bikes? Why would you shut down and still have these things with you? Are there office equipment? Mind you, another startup just raised capital. Why go buy new stuff when they can just offload these things from you? So you can begin to understand the value that MAASAI as a platform brings. So we help you to also stakeholder management, investors, merchants, and stuff like that, because it's very, very key. A lot of startups shut down, and just a day before shutting down, they go on LinkedIn and say, oh, thank you, everybody. Thank you for your support. Thank you to our investors. So the investors are written about the shutdown on LinkedIn. So to thank you to our investors for believing in us. Wow, on LinkedIn. So look, you have to bring them in. Bring them in. What's the issue? At the end of the day,
Mm.
some investors even say, look, if this is the issue, then we're going to give you more capital. All you should have just done is ask. You can see me being very careful to just give answers because a lot of issues are around mindset,
Mm.
right? And even when I give these master classes or sessions, right, I speak a lot to the mindset because when you solve that mindset, you realize that some of these things will never even get to the textbook answers.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because your mindset around, and I agree with you. I think one part of it is mindset, but I think it's also the other things like pride, your ego. You care about what other people think.
The stigma of shutting down. No,
Correct,
see,
correct.
you know, when I was talking, I said we help you to ascertain whether you're acquisition ready. So we're working with acquisition ready businesses. You see that term acquisition ready is very big because there's a popular saying that companies do not get sold, they get bought. Nobody wants to buy a company looking to sell, right? Like, why are you looking to sell? What's the motivation for selling? So we work around this as well because it helps to even craft the story and not allow you to be bought at a very heavy discount or bought for peanuts.
Does msai prevent or help acquisition ready businesses to essentially ensure like a smooth, you know, handover and sale?
Yes. So our solution is end to end. We work with companies from the very beginning to the very end because again, and a lot of emphasis is not really highlighted here, but there is post acquisition, which is one of the
Mm.
hardest stage. Post merger, that transition, that compliance, that integration of cultures, integration of tech, integration of talent. Oh boy, that's one of the hardest. That's the make and break. So we also support in that regard as well, end to end.
Shagan, this was so insightful. Thank you for your time. The last part of the podcast is called the Quickfire. So I'm just going to ask you quick questions. And if you could answer in maybe a word, a short sentence, that would be perfect. So if you were an entrepreneur looking to fundraise, who would you approach first? And I'll give you an example. You are in the ed tech space.
So if I'm looking to fundraise, two things. If I have the network, then I'm going to approach investors investing in the edtech space. If I don't have the network, then I'm going to approach those that do have the network and that can connect me to investors investing in the edtech space and investors that are actively investing, not the ones that are still fundraising.
That's a good tip. Grow your network, or find people who have a big network and leverage their network.
Or
If
come to
you
MAASAI.
had come to msai, amazing WhatsApp community and community. Second question. If you had $1 million right now that only could be invested in an early stage startup, two-part question. The first is what industry? And the second is what qualities in a founder do you look for and would you invest in?
So right now, climate tech. Um, I see a lot of great innovation coming out of climate tech. I'm very tempted to mention more than one, right? But climate tech is one industry that I believe is going to transform. Is already even transforming the world, and it's going to do more. Like I said at the beginning of this conversation, I always start with the why. Founders that have a good understanding why they are going into the world of driving impact, right? Founders that have the right mindset. I always look at that, look out for that. Founders that have the right mindset and understand exactly why they are doing what they are doing, what exactly they are doing, how they can drive that impact. That comes first above every other thing, like great, every other thing like expertise, educational qualification, and all of every other kind of KPI you can think of.
Amazing. Next steps, what's in the pipeline for you personally and professionally?
MAASAI just secured funding, so uh, it's all about building, right, and powering exits. We want to in the next 5 years, we want to ambitiously power at least 50% of the exits coming out of Africa. You're the first to hear it.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.